Hi students. So right now we are going to take a look at the atmosphere, and we already learned a little bit about the atmosphere earlier in the year, but we're going to circle back to it. So when you get to the first page, make sure that you open up your guided notes so that you're able to use these notes on the module exam. So the atmosphere is mostly made up of nitrogen and oxygen. It's not just oxygen that's in the atmosphere. And then the only like 1% of the atmosphere is made up of these other types of gases. So as we learned earlier in this module, the atmosphere has many different layers. So we are going to start with the outermost layer and work ourselves in. So the first one that we're going to look at is the exosphere. So this is going to be the layer that separates the atmosphere from outer space. So there really isn't a clear boundary here, but this is going to be where satellites orbit the Earth. This is going to be the part of the atmosphere. The next furthest down is going to be the thermosphere. So it is going to be the area so the thermosphere is going to be important because this is where a lot of the UV radiation coming from the sun is absorbed. So the ionosphere is also part of the thermosphere. So this area is where energy waves from the sun are so strong they cause gas particles to break apart into charged particles called ions and free electrons. So this layer also makes long-distance radio communication possible by reflecting radio waves back to Earth. Next, we have the mesosphere, and this is going to be the middle of the atmosphere. So here we have a lot more gases that are mixing together, and this energy is going to help drive the global circulation of different types of energies. So this is a hard place for people to study because it's too high for weather balloons, but it's too low for satellites. Next, we have the stratosphere, and this layer is very important because it contains the ozone layer, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. So the stratosphere is a dry layer with few clouds where the air is about 1,000 times thinner than its sea level. The ozone layer absorbs energy from the sun, protecting life on Earth from most of sun's damaging rays. So the very lowest layer of the atmosphere is going to be called the troposphere. And this layer has the breathable air and the clouds that we can see. And it's also where all of the weather occurs on Earth. So Earth's surface is the source of heat for the troposphere. So remember, we were talking about how land and the atmosphere, land and air can exchange energy from each other. So this is going to be the case with the troposphere. The heat source, again, is going to be the Earth. So those are the different layers of the atmosphere. It's going to be important that when you guys are taking your notes that you write down some of these differentiating factors because you're going to be asked about them on the module exams. They may give you two characteristics like where is the ozone layer located, and you're going to have to be able to know that it's in the stratosphere. So I said that we were going to go back and talk about the ozone layer. So think of the ozone layer as almost like the Earth's natural sunscreen. So the whole job of the ozone layer is to absorb some of the harmful UVA radiation from the sun, and that helps protect us. So the reason that we care about the ozone layer is that over the course of many years, we've found that there's actually a hole in the ozone layer. So when there's a hole, that means less of the layer is able to absorb the sun's harmful UV rays. So this has effects like maybe more sunburns, more eye disease, and more skin cancer. So why did we have this hole in the first place? So scientists concluded that chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, were to blame. And you can find these things in many household products. So in the year 2000, most CFCs were banned, and they are hoping that the ban will help the ozone layer gradually to recover over time. So on the first lesson, we learned a little bit about the greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse effect is something that helps warm the Earth's surface. But just like energy gets trapped in the atmosphere, we're also getting harmful types of gases getting trapped in the atmosphere along with the energy. And unfortunately, humans are mostly to blame for this. So we are putting all of these different types of gases, mostly carbon dioxide, which happens when we breathe out, but we're putting all of these different types of harmful gases into the atmosphere, which is causing global warming, which is an increase in the Earth's average temperature. So the reason that global warming can be a bad thing is it can raise the sea level. So this happens from water being added to the oceans, from melting land ice, and this is also going to expand the sea level as it warms because it's less dense and the molecules will be further apart. So this is where you're seeing a lot of places along the shoreline. They may be experiencing the loss of the shoreline due to this rising sea level. So we can also have something called droughts and desertification. So these rising temperatures can cause more regions to become dry regions that maybe weren't there in the first place. And this can lead to less rain and to water shortages in these dry areas. So desertification happens when we have droughts for too long. So this is when areas may have been able to be fertile, so that means that we can plant things there, but because of all of the droughts, now we can't use it as farmable land. So it becomes a desert. So this poses a threat to people because it may cause food shortages because we aren't able to plant anything. So you guys know that the biosphere is where all of the living things are. So these living things are going to have to adapt to the climate. So this can mean very dangerous things for animals that only survive in very specific climates. And finally, this is also going to cause regional temperature changes. So global temperature changes affect different regions differently. The overall temperature of Earth has warmed by less than 1 degree over the past 120 years. So this may not seem like a big deal. It's only 1 degree. But some parts of the world have warmed more than 5 degrees, and other areas have cooled because we're only looking at that average over the last 120 years. So these wildly different temperature changes can impact farming, and it can also lead to longer or shorter growing seasons. So what's going to be important in order to help reduce global warming is that we get familiar with our carbon footprint. So this means that hopefully we can recycle, use reusable cups instead of plastic bottles, turn off your lights and electronics, and then do things besides driving a car when you need to get places. I know you guys can't drive yet, but later down the road. You guys might want to eat less meat and grow more vegetables or plant a tree. So another issue with the ozone layer is that you guys may be exposed to different types of skin cancer. So on the module exam, it's going to be important that you guys know the different ways to protect yourself when you go outside. So it's actually not really good for you if you go and you try to burn or tan. So that UVA radiation can cause a lot of damage to your cells, and it can also increase your risk of skin cancer. So you should avoid tanning. When you guys go to get into the ocean or get into the pool or go fishing, you should be extra careful because the water reflects the sun, which can increase the chance of skin damage. So you should be cautious when you do anything on the water and make sure you put on extra sunscreen because of the reflective qualities of water. So if you're outside between 10 and 4, that's going to be when the sun is most intense. So if you guys see some shade, you should definitely try to be in a shaded area between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So you should apply sunscreen when you go outside. And 50 plus SPF sun protection is going to give you the most protection when you go outside. So it's the one that you should be using. And you should be reapplying it every 2 hours or every 40 minutes if you're in the water. So that goes back to the reflective nature of the water. So you have other ways of getting vitamin D. So you may want to try to get vitamin D from other places instead of from the sun. So you can be eating fatty fish. So think like salmon. I know that's something that you guys like, some of you. And then also orange juice and other types of cereal are good ways of getting vitamin D. And finally, you're going to want to wear protective clothing when you go outside. So this is long sleeves, hats, sunglasses, and maybe even pants. And that's going to be able to protect you from sun's damaging rays. When you get to the end of the lesson, you're going to want to open up the Talk Like a Scientist because there were a lot of vocabulary words this week. And then these vocabulary words will also give you a little bit of a head start on the different layers of the atmosphere so you can have that information ready for the module exam. So I would really recommend opening this up and copying everything over. This week, we're going to have a lab. It's actually more like an activity, but the courseware called it a lab. So you're going to see a separate video on that later. Good luck.